Thank you all very, very much for joining us today. My name is Robert Pleticha, and I'm working with Admedicum, who's working with the Alliance for Pulmonary Hypertension. This is the first webinar of the new 2025 quarterly format. It'll be a series, one every quarter. We'll be looking today at developments in the PH field in the first 3 months of the year. We'll start with an overview of the main news with Dr. Hans Klose. We will then be reporting on the most important scientific event of the quarter, which was the PVRI symposium in Rio. We will also have later Ms. Karen Osborn, Matt Granato from the US PH Association, PHA, and two professors that I'll introduce later. So just to remind you, you have the option to have wordly translation, interpretation for this webinar. I've switched it on and it's going. So just go down there to the bottom of the Zoom window and apps and turn Wordly on. So we're going to be a little strict about timekeeping as we have some presenters coming and going. I know Dr. Klose has a meeting just after that, just after this. So yeah, I'll do my best to keep us on time. And with that, I want to pass it over to Dr. Klose. Thank you very much.
Rob, thank you so much for the invitation and the possibility to speak to so many interested people and patients. It's a great honor for me. I share my screen at the first step. Probably everybody is able to see my screen now.
Yes.
Yeah, great. Okay. Yeah, again, I'm really happy to and I hope I will stick to the time. So I hurry up at the beginning and probably calm down at the end of my talk. So again, hello everybody. These are my conflicts of interest. And normally I start when I do such kind of presentation. I have to talk about what's new and hot in 2025, and I start 160 years ago when this disease was first described. And probably you will understand why I start this so far in the past. It was the 8th of November in 1865. It was an Austrian pathologist describing for the first time this disease. And he called this disease in former times endarteritis pulmonaris deformans. And I don't know if you can see now the whole picture. I'll make it look bigger. This is a German. So for the German-speaking audience, you can read this. I tried to translate it in English. And the first idea was he called it endarteritis. This means an inflammation of the vessels. So it is an inflammation. He called it because this term, inflammation, was used currently often for many diseases. So inflammation played a big role 160 years ago. But he described outgrow of all vessel layers becoming a pseudomembranous connective tissue formation. So he described vasoproliferation 160 years ago. And this proliferation leads to a narrowing of the vessels and the small lumen of the vessels. And this was caused not only by inflammation alone. So he was so clever 160 years ago. And I show you the next picture, if it's working. Why not? Wait a minute. So now I show you the next picture again, just to let you know that this is a disease. It is not vasoconstructive. Yeah, it is not a small vessel. It's vasoproliferation, as you can see. Probably you can see my text, my laser pointer now. It is an obstruction due to a proliferation of all layers of the vessels, and this leads to an upload of the pulmonary vascular resistance and then a right heart failure at the end. So keep in mind, this is the main issue, the main problem of this disease. And you all know there are a couple of treatment options nowadays, and in the last 30 years we found 3 pathways to address. We had 5 drug groups and 10 approved groups, and you all know these medication. You know the NO pathway with sildenafil and tadalafil and riociguat. You probably know better the prostacyclin pathway with epoprostenol, treprostinil, selexipag, and the endothelium pathway with ambrisentan and macitentan and bosentan. But keep in mind, these are mainly vasodilatative drugs. So they do a vasodilatation and not anti-proliferation. So, and therefore, and the next cartoon, to make it clear, this is a normal vessel here. And due to many signals and many parts, this vessel becomes a stiff proliferative vessel with a small lumen. And there plays a role inflammation, like Professor Julius Klopp told us 160 years ago. Fibrosis, inflammation, vasoconstriction, everything. And the main idea nowadays is to bring this vessel back to a normal vessel and reduce the vascular resistance. So I did this picture years ago when we thought about what are further potential therapeutic approaches or options. And I will talk about some of them today. And these are not news from the last 3 months. It goes longer back. But let me start, due to time issues, now with the next picture. Here you see novel pathways option. You see again the construction, you see the proliferation. And I start with the story about imatinib. And probably at the end of my talk, you will never forget imatinib, because it's was the first step to an anti-proliferative drug approach in PAH. And this started long time ago. It started with a cancer treatment. Gleevec or imatinib was approved for cancer treatment, for treatment to leukemia or stomach tumors. And it was called, because it was the first anti-proliferative drug in this field, it was called magic bullet of cancer treatment. And I, years ago, asked myself, probably that might be magic bullet of PH treatment. Why? Because the story started in 2005 in Gießen, the Gießen Working Group. I don't know if Ghofrani is in the hood now, but Ralph Shermu had these mice, and he induced pulmonary hypertension in mice, as you can see here. Again, the layers in different colors, vessels, normal vessels here on the left side, in the middle, vessels induced pulmonary hypertension, and then imatinib was given, and you see it's gone again. Yeah, it's remodeling. So if this is working in mice, probably it's working in people too. The first publication in humans was this in New England Journal of Medicine. You see here a patient with PAH and combination therapy with iloprost, sildenafil, and in these times, 2005, bosentan. And to guide you through this cartoon, you see here red, the functional class. It was functional class 4, so dyspnea while a little bit of exercise. PVR was, as you can see here, 1,500. And 6-minute walking distance in blue, getting down to 260. And then on the waiting list for transplantation, they start imatinib. And look what happened. 6-minute walking distance, 400, functional class 2, and PVR about 800. So next step was the announcement of the results of the phase 3 clinical trial imatinib in PAH patients. This was the approval trial, and this was announced in 2000. 11 in the ERS, European Respiratory Society Congress in Amsterdam. And have a look at this audience. It was crowded. It was really crowded. Here in front, you see Stefan Rosenkrantz. He was later the first author of the European guidelines. A lot of people, even from the industry here, and so a lot of people waiting for the results. And these results were really first seen in my life. I mean, here, the cardiac output, so what is the heart able to do, was elevated by at least 1 liter per minute. Volume more. Pulmonary pressure was down to 3.5 millimeters Hg, and if you see on the placebo group, it was 5 millimeters in difference. And PVR about 400, so 5 Wood units, something like this, down. So it was effective, but there were side effects. 7 of these people get a subdural hematoma, and therefore this drug was never approved for PAH, but it was effective. And I knew still patients on imatinib after years, still stable. So, and these are really out of the last 3 months from the London working group. I guide you through this picture. This is again imatinib in PAH. Not so many patients, I think 80, something like this. You see here, they start here. Look at the upper front of this picture. This purple one is the pulmonary vascular resistance, so the wideness of the vessels. You see starting point, then giving the drug, and PVR is going down very nicely. And when you stop, the effect is losing a little bit, but not to the point comparable with the beginning. So it's still an effect there here. And this leads us to the idea doing something like pulse therapy. So you give therapy, imatinib, then you make a drug holiday, and then you give therapy again. And nicely seen here is the activity, I think very important for patients. You see activity level here from the beginning, no imatinib, and then you see nicely that activity is rising and continuing after stopping this medication. So it's an effect over the stopping time. So it's quite nice results. I think imatinib is still a drug to have an eye on. So this is a cartoon. Okay. Next, imatinib is working over a receptor. I don't want to go into details, but it's a receptor. It's called PDGF receptor. And there's another, it's imatinib, and here you see seralutinib. It sounds equal, sounds quite there. It's a second or a third part of these receptors blocked here, and it's a new medicine for PAH. And I show you seralutinib because this is an ongoing clinical trial. Seralutinib is probably nicely to keep in mind. This drug you can inhale by a dry powder inhaler. You don't have to take it by pill, by IV, by sub-Q. You can inhale it like COPD or asthma patients, and it's effective anti-inflammatory, anti-proliferative, anti-fibrotic. So it's a lot of effects. And I show you this because it's an ongoing trial. It's a trial one step further beyond imatinib, nicely inhaled and a lot of targets. And I show you now, I don't show you pictures about the effect on hemodynamics or PVR or something you probably don't understand. I show you pictures because pictures can tell you a lot more than 1,000 words. Here you see 2 patients and you see pictures of the vessels of the lung. On the left side here, you see a placebo patient. You can see female, 24 years old, PD5 prostacyclin, and you see baseline and then placebo, and you see week 24. And have a look down here where my pointer is. This is from the beginning, and now switch to here. And probably you can see in 24 weeks there are a loss of vessels. Yeah. And now look on seralutinib patients. starting here, and then a step forward, week 24, and compare these pictures, and you can nicely see that everywhere are more vessels. And this is countable. If you look on PVR, this is plus 280, this is minus 160. So even the PVR is getting down because there are more vessels. The lumen is bigger. So ongoing trial all over the world, and I really try to tell you these are, and now we go one step forward in the time issue. Probably the majority of you, and I think all of you, know the first in-class anti-proliferative drug. So it's sotatercept, and the rest of the meeting we will talk about sotatercept. And sotatercept is the first approved drug with clearly anti-proliferative effects. And this is the mode of action here. I don't want to go into detail, but there is an anti-proliferation and proliferation part in all our cells and vessels. And if one part is blocked by probably a gene mutation like BMPR2 mutation, then the other one is giving the leading role. And therefore, it's a lot more proliferation than anti-proliferation, and the vessels are growing. And therefore, sotatercept can, by catching activins, block this receptor or block the activins, and the receptor is not loaded, and therefore anti-proliferation or proliferation is going down, and anti-proliferation can go up again. So this is idea, and it's working. It's clearly working. Yeah, it's clearly working. If you look here at the Stella trial, it's clearly working. 6 minute walking distance is better, and I think this one is quite impressive. If you look on patients, total number of patients who died or had one clinical worsening event, so have to go to hospital or right heart failure, you see in the sotatercept group only 9 patients achieved this, and 42 in the placebo group. So this is a clear benefit for patients when taking this drug versus placebo. So this leads to one of the biggest pharma deals ever in the world. Acceleron was the company who designed this new drug, and it was bought by Merck for $11.5 billion. So this is a huge deal, and you can look here. They think about 7.5 billion market in 2026 for this drug. So you all know this drug probably, and you all know this is a hype about this drug, and it's a good drug. Honestly, it's clearly it's good, but it's not the end of our treatment ideas. It's not the end of anti-proliferative treatment. It's one big step to this goal. And probably you all know this. I had this out of CNN Health, yeah, a miracle. FDA approves a new drug that may help stop a rare fatal condition that doctors call a ticking time bomb. I know a lot of things are a ticking time bomb, and you probably know, I don't know this young lady, but here she was severely ill, and here she is fit again after taking sotatercept. We know some of these patients who are super responders, yeah, but I will end up this talk by telling you, yes, sotatercept is a good drug. Definitely. Had a lot of benefits here, increasing functional capacity, improving functional class, decreasing mean PUP and PVR, reduce the risks of clinical worsening events, and so on and so on. But there are adverse events, as in any drug. Yeah, there are quite a lot of bleeding events we see in our clinic as well. And the main part, the main thing that I try to let you remember is that there are keys unknown. So long-term efficacy and safety is not clear yet. Yeah. And there might be antibodies developing, so we don't know what it's doing to the infirmity and the fatal harm. So I just want to let you know that this is a good drug, but keep in mind the fight against pulmonary hypertension is not over yet. Yeah, and this is the goal: cure PH. And therefore, we need science, we need clinical trials, we need open mind, we need to go on. Yeah, because sotatercept is the first antipruritic therapy. It's a good thing, but never forget the established therapy. Yeah, we have three arms: really established therapy and good therapy. We don't know enough about long-term effects and side effects. And there are, and hopefully you understand, there are further promising ideas. And therefore, I like to thank for the attention. This is my small but very excellent team out of Hamburg saying hello to you. And now I'm open for questions, and there might be questions. Thanks a lot. And I'm a 1 minute 55 before the
Yeah,
after my.
well done. Well done,
Okay,
Dr.
thank you very much.
Thank you very much for getting straight to the point. Though I'm sure there were some details left out, but we're now over 60 on this webinar now, and
Great.
just want to welcome those that just joined recently. So we will, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. This presentation and the recording will be put on the Alliance for PH website in the next days, I would say. And yeah, here we have one of the next speakers coming up. First, I think Mrs. Osborn, sorry, and then Professor Ghofrani. So thanks for turning your cameras on and saying hello to your colleague, Dr. Klose. We did have one question. What would you suggest for a progressive PAH patient lung treatment, if possible, or adding sotatercept? I don't know if you can even answer that one, because we don't want to be giving medical advice when you don't know the person.
It's quite difficult to give medical advice if you don't
Yeah,
know the whole story
yeah,
behind this. I think one thing might be clear, that we have good options in the conventional treatment, I would say, yeah. And I think we don't have to forget them. So before starting a new drug, please think about all the good old things, and they're helpful as well.
No, thanks. One more question. Do you have already any interim data on the phase 3 of seralutinib?
No, I don't.
No. Okay.
No,
Well,
I don't.
yeah,
Probably Adi has. I don't know. No,
okay.
I don't.
Even
No,
if I
thank you
had,
very
I
much.
couldn't disclose, but we don't have interim
Yeah.
results.
Okay. No, thanks everyone for your questions. And no, thank you, Dr. Klose, for joining and sharing that with
Thank
us.
you.
That was very, very interesting. And I know you have to run to another meeting now. So yeah, people will be coming and going today, as you've probably already noticed. And next up, I want to introduce.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Yeah, thank you. I want to introduce Karen Klose from the Pulmonary Vascular Research Institute. Yeah, she's pulling up her slides here now. So yeah, thanks, Karen. You're going to tell us about the Rio meeting that just happened recently. Looking forward to it.
Lovely, thank you. Thanks ever so much. And thanks also to Pisana and everybody at the Alliance for this invitation. It's really exciting to be here. I'm Karen, I'm Chief Exec of the Pulmonary Vascular Disease Organisation. And whenever I think of our name, it puts me in mind of a really big building full of laboratories and things like that, but nothing could be further from the truth. Actually, what we are, we're all about people. We're a little bit like a learned society, if you know what I mean. So we bring together a global network of pulmonary hypertension physicians, researchers, industry, regulators, and they come together to tackle some of the most pressing challenges in PH. And because they're the experts, they're the best people to be defining what those challenges are, and to be coming together to see how they can meet them. So this photo was taken at our most recent meeting, which was in Rio, and I'm going to come on and talk a little bit about that later. But to start with, I'm just going to tell you a little bit more about PVRI and who we are and what we do. We're not primarily a patient organisation. There are many wonderful patient organisations around the world, and we work really closely with them. They're doing great work, but we don't want to tread on their toes. We don't want to duplicate their work. We want to collaborate, not compete. So we obviously do involve patients in our work, because everything we do, the education, the learning, the research, it's patient involvement is only going to make that better. But I'll touch on that a little bit more as we go through. So how does our learned society work? Well, I think the strength is we pull together the skills, the ambition, the knowledge and the energy of this vast global network of academics, of clinicians, of regulators, patients, pharma, and they all have a common interest in PVD, but specifically in PH. And I think this is particularly seen in the work of our work groups. So we've got 21 different global work groups, very active at the moment, all over the world. We've got 8 work streams that form our innovative drug discovery initiative. Now, the idea behind the IDDI, it was to bring multidisciplinary teams together, crucially including pharma and regulators. Several also have patient involvement too, to try and improve the pace and the efficiency with which new treatments reach patients. So that was the reason why they were developed about 5 or 6 years ago. The groups at the moment include lung transplantation, clinical trial design, pediatrics, group 3 PH, and more. There are details of all these on our website. And a lot of our groups produce educational materials, mostly addressing the needs of PH professionals rather than patients. But it is worth mentioning, I mean, we do some patient-facing work, and our lung transplant work stream at the end of last year did a great webinar that's freely available. You can find it on our website. Patient-facing, all about lung transplantation. It was one of the most popular webinars of the whole of last year. So, and I think Sandeep Sahay, who's also presenting today, is one of the members of the leadership team for the IDDI work. So he's very involved in that. So thank you, Sandeep. The workstream also includes our patient engagement and empowerment group, and Matt Granato for quite a long time was one of the co-chairs of that group, and he's also presenting today. He's going to tell you about this fantastic global patient survey that the group ran over the last sort of 2 or 3 years, and it started to produce some really juicy data about what patients' views and needs are. So that's really exciting, and Matt's going to talk about that later. We also have regional task forces. So we've got groups in India, China, Saudi Arabia, and the Middle East. We've got a new-ish, but newly invigorated Latin American task force, which is, it's got some real energy behind it at the moment. They're doing some exciting things. So a lot of the groups, the regional groups, are focusing on health inequalities. It's a real theme that's starting to come out of a lot of those work streams at the moment. This is our infection task force, pictured in Rio. They got together to meet up in person, which is brilliant, because most of the work obviously is done online. So it's great when people come together. The disease specialty task forces include infection, as I said, high altitude, and again, these are both fairly niche areas, really, both disproportionately affecting people in low and middle income countries. And again, the health inequalities theme, it comes out quite a bit in their work. One of the specialty task forces is called PH-ICON, which is the International Consortium for the Genetics of Pulmonary Arterial Hypertension. And this is a really successful network of centres that bring together research expertise and patient populations for collaborative genomic studies. And there's a really exciting ambition. They want to discover the complete genetic architecture of PAH. There are contributing centres, perhaps not surprisingly, tending to be in high income countries where there's a good healthcare infrastructure. So they've got collaborating centres in the UK, USA, Italy, Austria, in Germany, Canada, Belgium, France, and Spain and the Netherlands. And we've also got paediatric task forces too. So there's lots of collaboration in research, supporting things like the development of guidelines that will raise care standards, and many of the groups publish papers and consensus statements and so on. So they're advancing the science, advancing the thinking in PH. And as well as collaboration, education is key to our work, and there are 4 arms to this, which are listed here. So we've got the journal, we've got e-learning, supporting research and collaboration in a variety of ways, and then the international meetings, which is the Congress is one. This is a slide just giving a brief overview of our magazine, our online peer-reviewed global journal. It's dedicated solely to pulmonary vascular disease and particularly PH. And it's freely available online. So if you do an online search for Wiley, which is the publisher, and pulmonary circulation, you can find all the latest articles on there. You can also get at them via our website as well. And what the website does is it'll point you easily at the latest ones, the newly published papers. Our e-learning is exciting and again, freely delivered. So there are 3 different programs in our webinar series. The one, the image you can see here is from PVRI Digital, which is, it's quite a formal monthly curated series, a program of webinars that runs across perhaps 12 or 15 months. It's put together by Patty Thistlethwaite and a committee. One has just ended, so they're busy planning the next one at the moment. And it was really exciting to see that this last series included a young investigator symposium series just for early career professionals, where they could present on a global stage. Another part of the e-learning is our community calls. Again, these are free, they're monthly webinars, led by Jason Weatherald and Katrina Barry, who was on one of Hans's slides there. So there's quite a strong patient voice in the community calls. Sandeep, I think, is also involved in that committee, a man of many talents. So they tend to be, I suppose, slightly less formal, more informal, discursive sessions with a Q&A. Young researchers in particular present their recently published papers, and then there's a lot of chat and a lot of debate about it that's moderated by the committee. And then as well as that, we have a sort of ad hoc series that's run by many of our groups. So we have a high altitude series, as I mentioned, and a infection task force and the lung transplantation. So a lot of our groups are putting learning material out there as well. You can catch up with those online as well if you can't attend in person, because it's so difficult. We know with different time zones around the world, it's really difficult for everybody to access them in real time, but you can see them on our website on Catch Up. And we also access funds for collaborative international research. We provide travel grants to professionals to attend our own meetings and others. And the photo here is of Kyrgyzstan, where one of our recent grants was made to enable a high altitude meeting to take place there. We also funded a scientific meeting in India recently, and a meeting of the task force in Latin America, bringing people together from many Latin American countries to plan the next stages of their development work. So yeah, we also give awards, presentation awards at our own meetings to so people can showcase travel grants. Sorry, we give people travel grants to attend our meetings so that they can showcase their work and present. And this is a video, and it's going to be really interesting to see whether it works or not. If I can make this happen. Moving on to Rio. So this is a short piece from a meeting that just happened in late January. And I don't think it wants to play. Oh, here we go. So.
Nice.
Thank you. Easy music. I apologize for the cheesy music, but it was a fantastic meeting. What we try to do to make the model sustainable is to have a kind of a safe meeting one year, where in a country where we're fairly sure to get a good footfall, so it might actually pay for itself. And then that enables us the next year to have a meeting in a country where perhaps it's, you know, we might not get such a high attendance rate, and we might have to subsidise it and make a bit of a deficit. But at least that way, if we move the meetings around the globe, we can make sure that we're more accessible. And it was brilliant that we had a really high attendance rate from Latin America in Rio. So we achieved that aim. We're going to Dublin next year, which I think and I hope will be really popular. So we're hoping for perhaps more than 500 delegates at that meeting. So that's our safe one. And we're busy at the moment consulting our membership about where to go the year after Dublin. So that could be a risky one too. I think that the Far East is coming out tops at the moment, but we shall see. So yeah, we were really, really pleased with the usual spread. We had delegates from many, many different countries, many different continents. The title of the meeting was Embracing Heterogeneity, and I think that is a really good title because there is just massive diversity in what we do at the moment, both in types of patients, in types of pH, in healthcare systems, and the types of treatment available. So we really do now, I think, need to embrace the fact that there's massive diversity in our field in a way that just a few years ago there really wasn't. And our board recently was discussing the pinch points in our scientific meetings, and just because they're so much bigger, there's so much more scope than there was a few years ago. So although we are the only purely PH global organisers of conferences, we can't please everybody. There's so much going on in our field at the moment. So I mean, we always get comments like there's too much basic science, or there's not enough basic science, too much paediatrics, not enough children. So, you know, you can't please everybody. But I suppose we should be really excited about that. It means there's an awful lot going on. There's a high level of interest. There's an excitement in the field. So we're pleased, even if we can't please everybody else. And I think it's worth mentioning that we're really aware that our networks aren't equally resourced, as I mentioned earlier. Diversity and equality and inclusion are really important to us. So as well as the grants and subsidies that I mentioned earlier, we're keen to support women in PH. For the last 2 years, we've had brilliant women's events at Congress to inspire, to share experiences, help women researchers and doctors make those crucial contacts so they have a support network around them, and enable them to more easily take that next step in their careers in what's quite a challenging environment, really. And we're also doing more early career work. So for the first time in Rio, we had an early career event, which was a huge success. There was the venue that we were staying in made a little bit of a mistake about when we wanted the bar. And so the event had a bar, and I think that made it a lot more popular. So we've had a lot of demand to do that again next time. So what the idea of that meeting was, it was a sort of speed mentoring meeting. And it also enabled us to take a reading of what the needs of early PH career doctors, physicians, academics are. We are very, very keen to make sure that PH pipeline, the workforce pipeline, is sustained and supported. So the more we understand about what their needs are, the better we can meet them. So we've got some quite exciting things planned for early career support over the next few months and years. So there are too many slides too many talks to tell you about, but the scientific sessions, or the recordings of all the presentations from Rio are available to our members on our website. But we also just recently put a selection of recordings of these on a platform called ViewMedi, and you can see the link there on the slide on the right. This is a free platform. It's an American platform aimed primarily at the medical community. But you can sign up, you can log in there, and if you search on PVRI, all our talks will come up. Some of them are super scientific and completely beyond me. I'm not a medical person, I'm not a scientist or practitioner, but there's some really interesting accessible stuff on there too. I mean, there's I would point you to the digital twin talk on there, it's fascinating, it's really interesting. So yeah, do have a look if you can. And if you're a member or want to become a member, you can access all the talks and presentations, not just from Rio, but from previous PVRI meetings as well.
Can patient organizations become members? Sorry to interrupt. Can patient organizations become members? Professionals.
Yeah, I mean, we usually have membership is for individuals rather than for organisations, but I mean, we do work closely with patient organisations, and we invited 4 here. You can see them here to exhibit and have stands at Rio. We work really closely with Matt and the PHA, and we have a memorandum of understanding, so we support them. And at the Rio Congress, there was one of the presentations given was a joint presentation, PVRI and PHA. And it's sort of they reciprocated at their last meeting as well and did a PVRI one. So we're amplifying each other's voices and promoting each other's work. So we're really happy to work in whatever ways we can. But the membership per se it's more for individuals. So that's our patient organisation support. Our next meeting is coming up in Amsterdam. It's the Drug Discovery and Development Symposium. It's a shorter meeting. Our Congress meetings usually are 4-day meetings, so there's an awful lot of scientific content in there. This is 1.5 days, but really, really interesting program. Lots of time for discussion. It's going to be fantastic. I'm really looking forward to it. And again, you can find out information about that on our website. And finally, before Dublin next year, January is our slot on the PH calendar. So we're really excited to be in Dublin, and we've got Sean Gain putting together a committee and developing a programme for that meeting. So yeah, really exciting stuff happening at the moment. I think it's quite an inspirational time to be in PH. So yeah, and if I can just finish now by thanking all the people who are involved in our network. We have a very small staff team in London, 6 people, and we exist to support the work that the community does. And by supporting them to come together, I think it's a really effective way of working. I mean, just bringing all these great minds together in one room just produces some quite inspirational results. So it's a delight to work with them all. And if any of them are here, well, I know people like Arde is here and Sandeep and Matt, I'd like to thank them because they're the lifeblood of PVRI. So my email is there. If you think that there's any way that we can help you, please get in touch. We'd be, it would be great to talk to you.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Karen. That was a very good presentation. And I mean, you touched on a lot of different things, but yeah, you gave us a good flavor for all the excellent things that you're doing. And I didn't know your organization so much before, but definitely have quite a good idea now. As much as possible, when you were mentioning like the Dublin meeting, I was trying to put the links in the chat, but I think those that might look back over your presentation too can easily find those on your website. Very nice website, by the way.
I mentioned social media. We've got loads. If you just if you're on X or Blue Sky. In fact, we're not quite on Blue Sky yet. We're just about to join Blue Sky, but yeah, you can find us on there too. So the info's there.
Yeah. No, we just had a few comments. Thank you for the resources. Thank you for your clear presentation about PVRI. Thanks. PVRI was a really great conference in Rio. So yeah, some attendees were there.
Excellent.
And before we go to Arde talking about the registry, I had one question myself. When I was thinking about the global reach that you have, are you seeing any successful strategies or methods or ways to address pH in low and middle income countries where, awareness is low, resources are low, maybe patient access to treatments are low? What can be done in those situations right now that is working, if you've seen anything?
It's really interesting. I had a fantastic meeting with some great people who want to get things going in Sri Lanka just last Friday, and they were asking, well, what's the blueprint? But how do we do this? And I had to say there isn't a blueprint because every country, every healthcare system, every patient population is so different that I would love to give people kind of a map for, this is what you do, this is how you do it. But I mean, we are developing a bank of learning. So, for example, I mean, we can help with grants. We can help with perhaps exchanges. We can help them by accessing funding on their behalf to enable some of those exchanges to happen. Those are the sorts of things we're talking about. We're also able to pull in expertise from really senior people who can address some of the learning needs of the professionals in Sri Lanka. There aren't many PH professionals that, people don't have skills there. There are no, there's very, very little cath lab access. So the diagnosis is stuck. So where we look likely to start perhaps is by seeing if we can get people trained up in echo, because that way at least, we'll start to develop a pathway through. So the very, very few cath lab places that are available can be used, to target the most high-risk people. So little by little, really. And I think, but I was told, I did have to make the point, we don't have that much money. So the grants that we can give to organisations, they're relatively small, they're sort of 10,000 to 10,000, but they were saying, actually, that makes a difference. In Sri Lanka, you could do a lot with that. So yeah, so I'm really excited to see what's going to happen. We might have a new task force coming, but
sounds like exciting times ahead. And as you said, just bit by bit, that's the way to do it. No, thank you, Karen, for joining. Yeah, it was lovely hearing your presentation and learning more about PVRI. I'd like to now pass the floor over to Ardi, and just thank him for coming here to present about the GoDeep registry. So yeah, Ardi, the floor is yours. Let me know if you need anything. And remember, if you have questions during the presentation, put them in the chat, and I'll try to ask them at the end if we have time.
All right. Let me see if I can share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
The presentation? Okay, very good. So first of all, thanks to PH Alliance for inviting me to this exciting workshop. Also to the previous speakers, Hans and Karen, for perfectly setting the stage. Pisana for bringing this group of speakers together, and for Robert for doing everything to make this happen and making this possible. And of course, also great thanks to all of our patients who are not only interested in the topics that are shared today and presented upon today, but also contribute to the development of new treatments and our growing knowledge about the pathophysiology of the disease by participating in clinical trials and being so engaged in also expressing their demands and their wishes, and share with us their sorrows, but also their happy times they might experience with their families, with every day gained with this very severe and progressive therapy. So thanks to everybody. My topic today is going to be about PVRI GoDeep, which is a truly global meta registry. And my thank also goes to Werner Seeger, who has been the driving force behind developing this initiative with a startup grant for PVRI. So also thanks for this very valuable and comprehensive startup fund, which allowed us to set up this registry. Enough with thanking. I think we should dive into the topic, and I'm happy, as I said, to share with you what's going on in the PVRI, so, in the GoDeep. So these are my disclosures as usual, and you can read them later from the transcripts and the recordings. What we did at the very beginning, before setting up PVRI, and I'm going to introduce the structure of the GoDeep registry for you in a minute, is to define what we really want to have as a basic set of data, and what is mandatory to be included. And we decided to start up with including patient data only if invasive right heart catheterization had been performed in those patients, as a means of gaining knowledge and information, but also as a quality assurance, so that the classification, which happens later on clinical grounds, but also based on right heart cath data, is valuable. This is followed by data that are considered essential, like follow-up data, and also internal and external quality controls and benchmarkings, and then obviously recommended ones. And there is a lot of ongoing extended data collection ongoing, including an imaging module and genomic module, and also a module for biospecimen, which is really adding to the value of this registry. So how is it done? And you've heard of single center registries, you've heard of national registries, but also international registries, registries that cover a certain region of the world. All of those are based on some software which includes the data. You may all know Excel, but there are also other computing aids that you can use to collect those data. And then these data are used, a certain data set is included as a baseline set, but then some of these databases also have prospective follow-up of their patients with an actual addition on a regular basis of follow-up data. Usually, and we are talking about pulmonary hypertension and of course also about pulmonary arterial hypertension being a very rare disease, it's very difficult to assemble large numbers with single center registries unless you are a real comprehensive registry or a real comprehensive center that takes care of hundreds and thousands of patients like ours in Gießen or the Paris Center and a few others worldwide that really have huge numbers of patients that are taken care of. There is the possibility to join forces, and national registries have been set up, but there has really been no real global registry so far. And the reason why it was not possible so far was technical reasons. It is very difficult to approach multiple centers and then to align the databases to collect a homogeneous set of data and then include it in one comprehensive metadata registry. And this, in fact, could be resolved. The problem could be resolved by means of a very, very sophisticated software and hardware set that was provided by the university and the university hospital in Gießen. So this was one of our contributions to the process of setting up this meta registry. And what is necessary at the end of the day, so if representatives of other sites around the world or other organizations are present in this session, you may also approach the PVRI GoDeep consortium. What is necessary is one visit to the site. And what's done is that our people, our tech people, have a deep look into the registry. And what they do basically is only to align the header, to harmonize the header of the database so that the GoDeep machinery can read the data and there is an alignment of the parameters. Afterwards, it's really simply one click that uploads the entire database to the PVRI GoDeep team. And then this is assembled and put together in a pseudonymized form. So patient privacy is always assured in the global registry. It cannot be backtracked, and we only do that periodically with the sites for reasons of quality assurance. And that led, at the end of the day, to a very, very comprehensive data set. Remember, we are talking about a rare disease, presumably, but meanwhile, we have more than 35,000 enrollees, so patients and patient data, individual patient data sets with more than 8 million data points. And this is only to say that these are the so-called baseline data at the time of diagnosis. And just imagine that from all those patients, subsequent follow-up data are emerging and are continuously included into the database. 28 PH centers have already entered their data into GoDeep. And of course, and we have to admit, there is a European and North American predominance, but you may appreciate from the dots that we are reaching the goal of becoming a global database. There's further ongoing centers that are already in the process of data transfer and negotiations with more than 30 centers ongoing. So whoever is interested, please approach me or the team members of GoDeep Registry, or also via Karen and the PVRI, and we are happy to join conversations with those sites that want to join. We have already some data to share, and this might be interesting for you. So which type of patients are we talking about? And naturally, because we first approached experienced PH centers that mainly take care of PAH patients, we also have an overrepresentation of patients from the WHO Group 1 PAH, but a fair amount of patients also with Group 2 cardiac disease associated PH, Group 3 ILD and COPD associated PH, and also CTE PH. There are a couple of undefined patients of patient phenotypes that are currently also undergoing resorting and may even end up with an undefined group. And how about, let's say, one main parameter that defines pulmonary hypertension, namely the mean pulmonary arterial pressure in the different groups. And I believe that with the wealth of data, the size of the groups that we are looking at, with multiple hundreds, if not thousands of patients in each group, these data are becoming solid. They become referenceable, they are reliable data, and we can claim that this is the largest group of PH Group 1 in one database, showing the distribution of disease severity by means of mean PA pressure measurement. It is distinct from patients with Group 2 who usually display more mild pulmonary hypertension, or Group 3 with association with lung disorders, which are also usually a little bit more mild, as opposed to Group 4 CTEPH that has a quite a comparable distribution pattern like the Group 1 PAH patients. And then the sad truth for all groups is that still when patients present at the sites, at the centers, and this seems to be a global phenomenon, they present in advanced New York Heart Functional Class levels, majority of which are in Functional Class 3 throughout the PH groups. Also a good number of patients in far advanced diseases of stage 4 and a minority in classes 1 and 2. And the interesting finding is that this is true for all types of pulmonary hypertension. So there seems to be something with the notion that the disease is still made at a late stage, the diagnosis is still made at the late stage of the disease, but it may also be that the symptoms appear and occur rather late in the process and the progress of the disease. This seems to be a common phenomenon. When looking at the walking distance distribution, we also found and have published about those baseline data about the 6-minute walking distance distribution. It is around 350 to 400 meters in PAH patients, slightly lower in peak in patients from the cardiac group, and considerably lower in patients from Group 3. And again, Group 4 is rather comparable to Group 1 in this regard. So now let me dive a little bit deeper into the value of what you can figure out and extract from this comprehensive database. One example of which is we were interested in whether the risk scores are applicable to the Group 1, the classical PAH Group 1, and also to other groups of pulmonary hypertension. You may know that most of the current risk scores have been discovered and validated for PAH only. So this was one of the questions that were of interest, whether or not these risk scores are also applicable to other forms of pulmonary hypertension and how they compare in between each other. That's an ongoing debate amongst experts, which of the risk scores are better or worse, have a better predictive value, which one are to preferred. So what we were interested in was to compare the predictive value of the different risk scores, and we compared the most widely used risk scores like the REVEAL 2.0, the REVEAL Lite 2, the ESC-ERS guidelines from 2022, the Compara 3 strata and the Compara 4 strata. And bottom line is they all work. They all work well, even if in this very global and comprehensive database, the difference being that REVEAL 2 and REVEAL Lite 2 provide a more continuous depiction of risk strata rather than the compartmentalized risk strata of ESC and Compara. We also looked if these work in other groups of pulmonary hypertension. So this is a very small picture. I apologize for that. But what you can see in the left column is group 1 PAH. In the next column, it's group 2 PH with cardiac diseases, then group 3 and group 4. And bottom line, again, you can apply all risk scores to all forms of pulmonary hypertension, and they discriminate well with regards to the prediction of outcome or the individual risks, and they work very well throughout the disease spectra. Another question that we asked ourselves was, how about non-PAH PH and particularly PH in conjunction with lung diseases? And I'm picking some of these examples also because it is already published data and you can reference it in the respective publications. And when looking at patients, and these are common forms of pulmonary hypertension, those associated with common diseases such as COPD, an interesting finding was that when you compare PAH, particularly IPAH, and the long-term course of the disease and the overall survival with IPAH across the globe, the outcome, although being limited by the disease after 5 years, is still considerably better than in patients with PH COPD. And then when looking at PH COPD and dividing those with less severely impaired hemodynamics in the blue graph here, as opposed to those with more severe hemodynamic impairment with a PVR of higher than 5 Wood units, you can clearly see that the stronger the PVR is elevated, the worse the outcome is, and it has a prognostic impact. This is also interesting finding from real-life data from the off-label use of PH medications in patients with PH COPD, that whether you look at patients that are less severely compromised with regards to their PVR or more severely compromised with a higher PVR, PH therapies, when used off-label on an individual compassionate basis, have an impact on outcome and display beneficial effects regarding the outcome. So a very interesting finding from this database. Looking at PH-ILD, this is one of the most comprehensive databases for patients with PH associated with lung fibrosis. We could again replicate the data we saw from the COPD patient population, although the natural prognosis of the disease is much more dismal, even when compared to PH COPD. So the disease is much more severe, much more progressive, even if you subdivide by the subtypes of the fibrosis. Lastly, the global PH view, when looking at real comprehensive data and when asking for the impact of sex and race, now we are talking about looking at huge patient populations, irrespective of the adjustment to the different PH groups. We just looked for PH in almost 20,000 patients worldwide. And what we could show is that females in general have a better outcome when they suffer from pulmonary hypertension than males. Even if you look at more severe or less severe forms of PH, sex seems to be a determinant of outcome and risk in these patients. And that is a very fundamental finding when we also think of future clinical trials, when we look at the distribution of genders in clinical trials, and when also speculating about therapeutic efficacy of our beautiful drugs that we have shown. And of course, it's very important to also respect the race distribution, both on a global level, on the level of databases, but also in clinical trials, because this database could show that the prognosis of patients with an Black background, background or Asian descent is different than Caucasians. So we also need to improve our diversity in the clinical trials, as we do also in daily life meanwhile. Allow me to summarize that registries provide real-life information about patient phenotypes, disease severity, prognosis, and also treatments that are used. And single-center registries, however, are limited by low numbers. They also are limited by referral biases. Some may have a certain expertise for which they receive an overproportionate subset of patients. And there are different local, regional, and even national prescription habits. There are only few registries that provide comprehensive group sizes. Some are national, some are international, with heavy country biases, however. And it makes a difference if you look at registries from the US, where all treatments are available, or in many countries in Europe, or if you look at centers or national registries from Asia, Africa, or Latin America. Meta-registries, for instance, the PVRI GoDeep, now allow for a collection of large sample sizes and a global outreach. The quality assurance and harmonization of the data sets are challenging, however manageable, and PVRI GoDeep meanwhile oversees more than 35,000 patients with more than 8 million data points, and we are now collecting more and more prospective data. The first papers have been published, more are to come, so many of them are in the pipeline, so we will be able to inform the community about the gain in knowledge from this database. And we are in the process of including additional sites, and it is very thrilling that we also include more and more imaging data, biomaterial repositories, but also patient-reported outcomes, which are very, very important to be included into our database. And with that, I'd like to close. Thank you for your attention, but not forget to thank all the people from the Gießen PVRI GoDeep team that are listed here, without whom both from the clinician colleagues, the basic researchers, and our IT people, this could not have come to life. Thank you very much.
No, thank you for a very comprehensive presentation. And I want to say also congratulations, putting together that many registries and getting that many hospitals, to work together, researchers to work together, technical systems to work together. That's something that, people even have trouble getting one registry off the ground. So the fact that you were able to combine all this data, yeah, it means it's going to lead to, I think, even more interesting discoveries. And that was one of our questions. What do you see for the future of the database? What kind of research goals might you and the team have as the database even continues to grow? Because you mentioned that's part of the efforts as well.
Well, do I have another day to elaborate on that? Because there's so many ideas around. So we actually have a steering committee for this database that elaborates on those kind of ideas, prioritizes. It is open for suggestions. So participating sites, but also researchers across the globe may ask research questions to the database, and then again, these are analyzed and we provide the results. Everyone who contributes to the database is eligible to interrogate the database, extract data, and publish. So that is a gain for scientists and an incentive to engage in this collaboration. But of course, I mean, just to come up with one example, we will never see trials with pH-specific medication in certain subforms of the disease, just because it may be too rare, just because it may be not interesting for pharma companies, just because, we don't really know whether the treatments are going to be beneficial or not. And these really comprehensive databases with real-world data, they are able to inform, they are able to generate hypotheses, and thereby initiate a momentum that may lead to future clinical trials in underserved indications. The second thing is that we can think of combining these comprehensive data with imaging, with the biodepositories, with maybe all the omics studies that are done from biomaterials, and then feed all the data, all the information into an AI. And AI is going to play a very big role in the analysis of signals that we might oversee, but just because there are so many information in there. And we are looking forward to also implement AI, and this is an ongoing process at the time being. And I just saw that Sandeep has also joined, and I think that with colleagues like Sandeep and other representative of major sites who join the PVRI GoDeep, we will increase the size, but also the quality of the data of the database.
Thanks again for your presentation. And with that, I want to welcome Professor Sandeep Sahay, and his presentation will be on novel agents and their impact on the treatment algorithm. Thanks, Ardi, and Sandeep, over to you.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Dr. Ghofrani. Are you going to share the slides, or am I supposed to?
I can get them up to share now. Sure, no
Okay.
problem.
Okay.
Yeah, if you want to start talking, please go ahead.
Sure. Well, my talk was during the PVRI conference was focused on the novel treatment drugs and their inclusion in the treatment algorithm. So I will be discussing that. I'm not seeing the slides.
Yep, sorry. I thought they were open and they were not. And now
Okay. If not, then I can.
5 seconds and they're up. There,
Okay,
they're up.
perfect.
I need to do
Thank you. Thank you, Robert.
Sure. Yeah, please go ahead.
So let me make it why I'm still not seeing on my screen. I'm seeing my picture.
Okay.
Okay. I mean, if you want, I can share from my side.
Maybe I messed something up. Yeah. How about now?
Yeah, I'm seeing it now, and yes, now I'm seeing the slides. Okay, thank you. Thank you,
Great. Sorry
Robert.
about that.
So will I be able to move the slides, or
I think so. Yes.
well, I'm not seeing
Now.
I guess maybe I'll have to ask you to do it then.
Yeah, try now if you can click and advance. I've given you slide control.
No, I'm not able to. Or is it best that I just put it up on my side? That will be much quicker and easier, I guess.
Okay.
Assuming.
Well, share it.
Okay, that's fine. Let me just do share, and I think that'll be easier for everyone. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Sandeep. I think this is the second webinar you've done with the Alliance for PH, so we
Yes.
appreciate
Can
you
you see
coming
my
back.
slides?
Yep, I see your slides. You're in presentation mode. Perfect.
Perfect. Thank you everyone for your time and attention. And I'll be focusing on next 15 minutes about the novel therapeutic agents and our current treatment algorithm. This was the same presentation I used at PVRI. These are my disclosures, and let's talk about the management of PAH. And whenever we talk about treatment for pulmonary hypertension, of course, survival always comes into the picture. And this is just a 2 Kaplan-Meier curve showing you the survival about the pulmonary arterial hypertension from the NIH registry and the Reveal registry. Clearly, the top curve shows better survival over a period of time. However, it is still suboptimal, and that's why there is a lot of stress about finding newer therapeutic agents to improve the survival in pulmonary arterial hypertension. And this is a slide just briefly talking about the progression of disease, what happens in PAH. And as you can see, this is just I can use analogy like a life cycle of PAH, and you slowly see the pulmonary vasculature, or the resistance vessels in the pulmonary vascular bed starts to get thickened and narrowed. And as it progresses, it increases the afterload for right ventricle. Right ventricle starts to develop dysfunction and eventually fails. And you can see in the center of the slide how the hemodynamic parameters change over a period of time. And then why does it happen? There are as we know, PH is a multifactorial disease, and there are multiple mechanisms involved. But the bottom line is there is a balance of anti-proliferative and the proliferative mechanisms, and that leads to these changes in the smooth muscles of the pulmonary arteries. This is a slide highlighting now the 4 different pathways which we have available for the treatment of PH. And as I highlighted, a paradigm shift because now last year we had another fourth pathway approved for the treatment of pulmonary arterial hypertension, and it works in a slightly different way. It believed to cause what we call as make anti-proliferative. It does not primarily work on a vasodilatory pathway or mechanism. On the right side, however, the 3 traditional pathways, which all of these drugs do have some anti-proliferative properties as well, but primarily act by causing vasodilatation as well. So the right side is of the slide. You could see the 3 traditional pathway: endothelin pathway, nitric oxide, and prostacyclin. And then on the left side of the slide, we have activin signaling inhibition, which is the recent addition to our armamentarium for the PH treatment. See. Why I'm not able to move. Okay. So briefly talking about how the sotatercept work, and again, as I previously highlighted, that in the disease there is an imbalance between the pro-proliferative and anti-proliferative mechanism. And what sotatercept does is it tries to rebalance that the way it works. As you can see on the right side, this is the smooth muscle cell where you have these activin a receptor ligand trap, which is highlighted here with the sotatercept, and it kind of blocks this signaling and it decreases the pro-proliferation signaling. It also modulates the BMP, which is the anti-proliferative signal, but predominantly it's an activin ligand trap, so it kind of decreases the pro-proliferative signaling in the smooth muscles. So on the clinical side, the drug got approval based on this pivotal trial, which was a stellar study. I think most of the clinician researchers and even the patients are familiar with this main trial. In the phase 3, this drug showed significant benefit in PAH. Just going over what the demographics were, as you can see, because it was a randomized, controlled, placebo-controlled trial, so a global study. It had 323 patients total and female predominant. The one thing to highlight that the trial had very prevalent patient population. As you can see, majority of patients were on triple or dual therapy. As you can see, 60% patients were on triple therapy and almost 35% patients were on dual therapy. And almost 40% patients were on parenteral prostacyclin. Just showing you the primary endpoint of the trial, which was the 6-minute walk distance. And clearly, I think anyone can assess that there is a very significant improvement in 6-minute walk distance in patients who received sotatercept compared to placebo. Although study was not designed for this, but they also observed pretty significant improvement in the morbidity events, or you can say fatal or non-fatal clinical worsening events, much less in the patients who were on sotatercept compared to those who were on placebo. So the drug actually showed a pretty all-round performance. It also improved the quality of life questionnaire also, and there were a bunch of other secondary endpoints apart from the hemodynamics. The echo parameters and everything also improved in patients who were on sotatercept. As I always say, nothing comes without a baggage. So all the drugs, this also had some side effects. And one of the main one which kind of caught our attention after the trial were the bleeding side effects. Some patients noticed some bleeding episodes. Majority of them were trivial nosebleeds, but some patients had some GI bleeds as well. Then the platelet count also was noticed, and also the increase in hemoglobin was noticed. One unexpected finding was development of telangiectasias, which we learned after the PULSAR study, and we observed that in this study also. And as you can see here, I'm highlighting those main side effects which we observe with sotatercept. And as you know, in the United States, when the FDA approved the drug for the first 5 doses, we are required to monitor hemoglobin and platelet counts in these patients. This is just showing impact on the hemodynamics. Although drug improved the mean pulmonary artery pressure, but interestingly, the way it works, we did not observe much change in the cardiac output and cardiac index, and it's sort of still, I would say, a little bit of a mystery. There are multiple hypotheses. It's probably hypothesis generating finding, and there are multiple thoughts behind it, why it is. But again, we clearly are not entirely sure the reason why we did not observe that. But regardless, the mean pulmonary artery pressure dropped pretty significantly. PVR improved pretty significantly in these patients. And this is a paper which recently got published because this was one thing, because traditionally we observe improvement in cardiac output with response to the treatment in PAH. And so there was this question whether the drug is effective in patients who have less cardiac output or cardiac index to begin with. And actually, it did show pretty significant improvement in those patients as well who had less cardiac index or cardiac output to begin with. Their 6-minute walk distance, as you can see, improved dramatically, PVR improvement and improvement in NT-proBNP. So across the board, it showed improvement regardless of the cardiac output at baseline. This slide just highlights the changes in the echocardiogram. And as I mentioned earlier, most of the echocardiographic parameters also improved in this patient population who were on sotatercept. This is long-term. Soteria is an ongoing long-term study of sotatercept. And as you can see, the effect was still sustained at 1-year mark from the beginning of the Soteria study, which is 24 weeks after the main randomized control study. So roughly 1.5 years, you can still see the patients were improving to low risk, and they were maintaining their functional class status and sustained improvement in NT-proBNP. So if we look at, to summarize all these findings, yes, there was improvement in the functional capacity, functional class improved, mean PAP and PVR improved without a change in the cardiac output. There was some evidence to reduce the risk of clinical worsening events and improvement in patient-reported outcomes as well. On the imaging side, there was improvement in the RV size and mass. If you look at the side effects, there was hemoglobin increase. In PH patients, I feel like that's somewhat beneficial just because they generally tend to be anemic. So perhaps beneficial in those patients, but of course they need to be monitored for a drop in platelets and the bleeding events. And telangiectasia is something we are observing, and I think we will need more data on this to learn how this really pans out and what is going to be the long-term implication of these telangiectasias. As of now, we do not know much about these. And then some other side effects were observed, like headache, rash, and diarrhea. So overall, fairly well tolerated drug with very much all-around improvement in the patients. Now, this is where we'll start talking about how we think that sotatercept is going to impact our treatment algorithm, and this is just more hypothesis generating. On the top part of the slide, you would see what we tried to, in this manuscript we published earlier this year, tried to show how our traditional treatment is and how it will be impacted with the sotatercept. As you can see, if the patient is on intermediate risk, you could start with the 0.1 dual therapy. then patient improves, regular follow-up, risk assessment. If they improve to low risk, great, you continue follow-up. But then again, as the disease progresses, they start falling towards intermediate to high risk, then you add prostacyclin or prostacyclin analogs, they improve, then again parenteral prostacyclin, and then eventually disease progresses, transplant or palliative care. That's our traditional. How we are thinking that how sotatercept is going to sort of help your patient. It's similar, dual therapy improves, again get worse. At number 3 here, you could consider adding sotatercept. That's the earliest evidence we have that you could start sotatercept on a patient. And then patient improves. Now, the number 4 is some durability or the sustained effect. We have data for a year or 2 after the randomized control study that patients have sustained effect. We're going to learn more from the long-term Soteria study as more manuscripts come out from Soteria, that how long this durability of effect will be, but you can see it clearly can impact the survival and prolong the survival. And then again, as the disease progresses, at number 5, you can add prostacyclin, and then you could see how patient respond and transition. And if things still do not work out, maybe transplant or palliative care. But again, for number 5 and number 6, we do not know when that time will arrive in a natural progression of the disease. If we start sotatercept earlier in these patients, we were a little unsure at this time, but this was more for what we thought could be the impact on the treatment and the survival. Now, I'm going to show you 2 algorithms in the next 2 slides. This is what we published last year, like a US perspective, where we believe that sotatercept can be earliest instituted in the treatment paradigm and how this may impact. And as you know, that the treatment in PH is risk based, and you do a baseline risk assessment, low, intermediate, and high risk, and then you proceed with starting the treatment. If your patient is low and intermediate risk, then you start on dual therapy. And then if they remain in low risk, you continue dual therapy. If they become intermediate low risk or intermediate high risk, how you would proceed with adding further agents. And those are the earliest positions where you can start activin signaling inhibition or additional oral prostacyclin agent or inhaled prostacyclin agent. The 2 things which I would really like to highlight here, which was we took a little bit of different approach. We put shared decision making with the patient in the center of all the decision making, that whenever we have any treatment options we added, it should be a discussion between physician and the patient to know what their expectations are, what their lifestyles are, what they are looking for. And then we consider adding what would be the right medication for your patient. The other approach, which was a little bit more expert opinion and currently not very well supported by the evidence, is that if you are low risk, but if your echo doesn't look good and your RV is looking bad, we suggested that we can consider adding a therapy. Again, this is something more expert opinion rather than evidence-based at this time. Now, if we look at the high-risk patient who we suggest that apart from the oral combination, you add parenteral prostacyclin and then do a reassessment at 3 months. And if you see that they have achieved the low risk, then you follow the low-risk approach. If they are in intermediate risk or high risk, while they are on prostacyclin, you may consider adding activin signaling inhibition. And if they still remain in high risk at 3 months reassessment, you definitely consider activin signaling inhibition and refer for transplant. The 2 difference between the intermediate or the high risk were consider lung transplant or refer for lung transplant. We were just being more, I would say, emphatic about sending patients for lung transplant if they remain in high risk at 3-month interval. This was from the World Symposium. Again, a very similar approach. However, in this one, the main change from the prior algorithms were that at baseline, we kind of categorized the low and intermediate into not high-risk patients versus high-risk. But the treatment recommendations are very similar to what we previously discussed in the previous one. But certain things to keep it in mind, which were highlighted in this algorithm, that most of the drug trials or the prior drugs which were done with the older definition of mean pulmonary artery pressure of 25 and the PVR of 3 Wood unit. We talk about risk assessment, but we also mentioned that hemodynamics, RV imaging, and other measures should be taken into account when you're advancing the treatment. Initial triple therapy for high-risk patient is recommended in high-risk patient, but may be considered in some non-high-risk patient where the hemodynamics is bad or the RV function is poor. And again, we talk about risk assessment and risk-based treatment, but keep it in mind, there will be many patients where the low risk will not be possible. And there could be majority of reasons, not just their RV is bad, but they are older, they're frail, they just cannot walk for 40 meters, their autoimmune condition, they are obese, their systemic diseases may preclude them to achieve the low risk status. And in those cases, the treatment should be tailored according to the patient needs. Then let's talk about some drugs in the pipeline which are showing some promising result, and seralutinib is one of those. It's a platelet-derived growth factor inhibitor, but it also has some anti-inflammatory proliferative properties through c-KIT and CSF1 blockages in the macrophages. This is an inhaled drug which is twice daily, and in phase 2, it met the primary endpoint of hemodynamic improvement. And this was a paper published in Lancet. And currently, the phase 3 study is ongoing, and very much likely that hopefully soon we will have the results of the phase 3 data. This is one more thing I wanted to highlight, at least in the United States. I'm not entirely sure if it's available in the Europe as well or not, but there was a combination pill now that you could use tadalafil and macitentan combination pill. This was a study published last year, which showed that the combination pill was equally effective in dropping the PVR in these patients. And so now it's just to reduce the pill burden for patient, and it was fairly safe and well tolerated by the patients. I would like to highlight this manuscript which came out, I think, last month. It was a global work with the disease expert along with the regulatory bodies and the patient representative. We published this in Lancet. It was more of a personal viewpoint. What should be our future paradigm for treatment should be. We started, of course, we know the natural progression of the disease is that it progresses. We initially focused on, with some trials for initial drugs, slowing the decline, focusing on the morbidity, mortality event. Then we started talking about disease improvement. And then we started talking about how about introducing the concept of remission, where patient takes the medication but stays in remission and no flares of the disease. Now, how would you define that remission? And this is, of course, this needs to be validated. This is the proposed table where we are talking about what could a cure in PH may look like, what the complete remission may look like, and what the partial remission may look like. And we took into account, again, this is based on the scientific data, but then experts sort of weighed in that what we believe should be a complete remission or partial remission may look like. And then improvement in hemodynamics. We took into the imaging criteria, mortality risk based on the risk and the disease, pH-related symptomatic burden, what their functional capacity is, and then what their disease course would look like if they achieve the complete remission. Again, this is more for, as I said, for future research and hypothesis generating, but I think that's where our discussion should go on here onwards. So overall, as we know, PH is incurable disease, and sotatercept is definitely a welcome addition. The possibility of reverse remodeling, I think currently we do not have enough to really say how the drug works and exactly what is the best technique to prove that. We are also watching carefully the durability of effect with the newer therapeutic. We do not know any future long-term use drug side effects. And as I highlighted, many new pathways are being explored. With that, I would like to end my presentation. Thank you. I'm gonna stop sharing my slide and I'm open for any questions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Sahay. We do have a few questions. Great presentation. Can you talk about the potential in HDAC inhibition Serino CS1 for future PAH treatment? Thank you. Just put that.
Yes, I think, thank you for that question. Again, like many other drugs, this is another molecule which is being investigated currently. And I saw there some early reports, some beneficial data, but those were small open label studies. I think they are moving towards their phase 2 and 3, and then we will see how that works out. I think at this point in time, I do not have more information on that, but it did show some early promising results in that.
Great, thanks. And yeah, we have Matt Granato here in the backstage ready to do the next presentation. But first, let's ask another question. Do we have any way of anticipating, I'll put it in the bottom of the chat now, the theoretical effects of using sotatercept with other new pathway drugs such as seralutamab? Sorry for the bad pronunciation.
Okay, so it's a very interesting question. So first of all, in the real world, seralutinib is still investigational and sotatercept is approved. However, now in the phase 3 trial, we are including some patients who are on dual therapy. So of course, with time, we will know once the seralutinib trial is completed. There was an abstract presented, which was more focused on the basic science. And it actually showed abstract presented at PVRI, which actually showed there is some synergistic effect of sotatercept and seralutinib in the animal model. I do not have access to that right now, but I think that's something in clinical arena will take a little bit more time for us to know. But I think there is some theoretical concept that yes, there is some synergism between the two drugs.
Sorry, I was muted. Maybe one last one. I promise, last one.
Sure.
Are there any reliable alternatives to right heart catheterization in diagnostics and assessing the progress? Can echo replace it at this stage?
So again, it depends on the practice at different places, how people practice. I mean, many people rely on cardiac MRIs a lot, and now, especially the way sotatercept trial was conducted, we have a pretty good imaging data also available from the echo. For diagnosis, right heart cath is still considered as a gold standard, or you could say it's still confirmatory. However, in future, if cardiac MRI is going to replace it, I cannot say that. But again, there is no big, large study to really support that head to head with a right heart cath. But there is definite some really exciting data on cardiac imaging is there, including the right heart, including the cardiac MRI. We use echocardiography in routine follow-up, but not as a diagnosis, but it's an excellent screening tool for pulmonary hypertension, and it is still recommended by the guidelines as a screening tool. I think someone is asking about CardioMEMS. CardioMEMS has definitely helped in certain patients as we are using, but it's still not very widespread being used in PH. But again, it all depends on the practice you are in and the patient profile you are looking at. I have few of my patients on CardioMEMS, but it's I think we are learning more from the heart failure patients that it can be utilized, and I've been using in certain patients where I feel repeated right heart catheterization is not feasible or not easy for a variety of factors, or the echoes can be challenging, or I need close monitoring on certain patients. So certainly there is a role for this to be done. As someone mentioned earlier, I think that CS1 trial is also using CardioMEMS in their study. So perhaps that will tell us more about how it can be utilized in PH clinical trials as well.
Thank you, Dr. Sahay, and thank you again for sharing your expertise with the patient community here through the Alliance for PH, and wish you a really great rest of your day there. And yeah, look forward to the next discussion with you. Always learn a lot. So we're grateful. Matt Granato from the PHA Association in the United States. I think this is also Matt's second time on a webinar with us at the Alliance. So yeah, Matt, how are you doing? And yeah, are you ready to present here and tell us about the Global Patient Survey? I'm kind of interested to see some results.
Absolutely. Thank you, Robert. And again, I also wanted to thank the Alliance for PH and Pisana in particular for inviting me. And some of the things that I'm going to reference are things that have already been mentioned by some of the other speakers. I just want to check that you're seeing my screen.
Yep, perfectly.
Okay, great. So I'm Mike Granato. I'm the president and CEO of the Pulmonary Hypertension Association. And again, thank you for joining me today. I'm really excited to present you some insights from the Pulmonary Hypertension Global Patient Survey, or PHGPS, which was a landmark initiative that brings the patient voice to the forefront of both care, research, and policy as well. So we already know that the experiences of living with PH can vary dramatically across the globe, but until now, we haven't had a systematic way to capture this variation. So understanding these lived experiences really was essential to us, to this group, not just to improve care locally, but also to inform global guidelines and future research efforts. This is really where we want the patient voice at the center of what we do. So PHGPS is the first survey of its kind, globally collecting data on how pH affects both adult and pediatric patients' quality of life, their healthcare experiences, and self-management. And our goal is simple. It's really to improve care and outcomes for every patient everywhere. The survey was structured into three 10-minute sections that covered really wider range of topics: diagnostics, treatment access, hospital visits, financial burden, quality of life, genetics, telemedicine. It was really designed to be both comprehensive and very patient-friendly. And this was really a true collaborative effort. So we've had the support from PVRI, and both PHA in the US and PHA Europe led some of the efforts in getting patients involved to complete the survey. And Cambridge, University of Cambridge researchers were also Joanna Pepkazava and Joe Newman were critical in this endeavor. And this was endorsed by Ear and Lung. It really brought together patients, clinicians, researchers, and industry partners in putting this together. The survey was built through consensus across disciplines and included over 100 questions. It was open to all PH groups through three responder streams. We had the adult patients, we had the caregivers, and the parents to pediatric patients. We translated the survey and beta tested it in 24 different languages, and it ran globally for about 2 months. And then the responses were analyzed both quantitatively and qualitatively. So we received actually over 3,700 responses from around the world, giving us a quite strong foundation to identify global patterns and regional gaps in PH care. And here's a really good overview of where the responses came from. We have really good representation all over the Americas, Europe, Oceania, and then some Asia and a little bit in Africa. So the data that we got will power multiple outputs, multiple publications. We have a primary paper that we're working on, a pediatric also paper, and a quality of life study, and some qualitative analysis that is being conducted right now. And these are not just academic papers or contributions, but these are also going to be used for advocacy purposes. So we're very well aware. I wanted to talk first about the 10 calls of action. So one of the things that came out of this paper were about this analysis were 10 different things that we identified, and we're calling them calls of action. So I'm going to go over those 10 things. Those are really the main outcome for us from this study. So the first one is the fact that we are well aware that time to diagnosis must be reduced because early detection is really vital for better outcomes. And the survey showed that in some areas, time to diagnosis has improved, showing that that is possible. But the rare character of the disease means that time to diagnosis is longer than more common conditions, which are excluded earlier in the diagnostic pathway. So the first call to action is really to reduce the time to diagnosis. We know that the earlier the diagnosis, the better the prognosis. The second one, although the majority of respondents had access to a specialist center, there's still a lot of variation. However, only about a third had genetic testing. We also saw significant variation in the treatment of CTEPH. So this leads us to our second call to action, which is every patient deserves access to centers with full diagnostic and therapeutic capabilities, including genetic and advanced interventions. Only about a fifth of respondents reported having completed a PROM, a patient-reported outcome measures, and from those, only a quarter received feedback from their provider. Therefore, we are advocating for patient-reported outcome measures to be integrated into care to track quality of life and guide support for patients. We also saw that only a third of patients discussed the effects of medication, and they were not seeking advice in changing or altering their treatment options. So our fourth call to action is for patients to be empowered to work with their clinicians, especially when managing side effects. This is about shared decision making. PH associations played an important role in patients' lives. That came out clearly from the survey. We believe more needs to be done by healthcare providers to connect patients and caregivers to PH associations around the world, because those provide education, support, and a sense of community. PH has a huge impact on work and education that came out clearly from the survey. So the sixth call of action is to design systems that support the necessary accommodations and the benefits that patients need to live a normal life as possible. The majority of patients are open to remote care. And for that reason, we are calling for harnessing technology to improve access. The vast majority of patients currently the vast majority of therapies currently available to treat PAH or treat PAH as only group 1. And our eighth call to action calls for other groups who remain underrepresented to get more attention, more focus in research and in care pathways, especially groups 2, 3, and 5. The ninth call, patients show interest and high satisfaction with participation in clinical trials when they are invited, when they participate in those. But we want to stress that patients should be invited to help design trials as well. Co-design by patients fosters better relevance and trust in participation, and the community needs to make a better concerted effort to reach out to more patients for clinical trial participation, because we saw that the majority of patients have not been involved in clinical trials. The vast majority have not been involved in clinical trials, and mostly because they're unaware. And finally, nearly half of respondents opted into future surveys. So GPS2 will launch in 2026 to measure progress and expand reach. And we are going to widen representation geographically, and we're going to ask more about groups 2 and 3. So just to recap, here are the 10 different calls of action, and you'll have access to these slides, I presume, so you can review them. But there's some future work that we're planning. So like I said earlier, we're planning a second survey cycle in late 2026 with the support of PVRI. And we expect to expand representation and deepen the analysis. And also to support this work, PVRI is launching a dedicated task force in the second quarter of this year to specifically focus on PH-GPS. And additionally, we are working and looking into how to enable access to the curated data for investigators as well as our industry partners. So that's my presentation. I wanted to thank you for your time and for your commitment to improving the lives of those living with PH. I think that together, the community in general, by amplifying the patient voice, can build something that is more equitable and more effective for treatment and patient well-being. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. That was really excellent. And yeah, we appreciate you sharing those very, very important results. And that's a really impressive survey. So yeah, I think that's really nice to see how it went there. We had a comment, really great presentation, Matt, and so good to see the importance of including proms. Yeah, as we, we're coming to the closing stretch, the home stretch of this webinar today, and thanks everybody for being part of it. I had a few questions for Matt, and well, hold on, let one of the participants ask first, and then I have a question I'm going to ask you. Where can I register as a patient to be taken up in the next survey? Is there anywhere like that?
There's no registration per se, but when the survey is out, depending on where you live, Daniela, you will see your local PH association promoting the survey, mostly through social media or direct emails to patients. So that way you will know about it and you'll be able to take it. Also, the PVRI will be blasting about it on their social media and their website as well. So just by going to the PVRI website, there will be a link to the survey and you can select the language in which you want to take it.
So yeah, sign up to the PVRI newsletter, amongst other reasons to do that maybe. And yeah, stay tuned for 2026 when that next version is out. Matt, I thought the calls to action were really cool. And I was just wondering, have any local PH groups used those in their advocacy yet? Is there a plan to, develop some kind of a campaign or develop further tools so that people can kind of put those calls to action into action in their country with maybe just adapting things a bit? What are your thoughts on that?
So that's our next step. So now that we've sort of got the first view of the data, in addition to the papers, we are planning on giving sort of country reports to those countries that participated, and so they can use those calls to action in their own country. Some may be more relevant than others, depending on the results by country. But absolutely, that's sort of the next step.
Nice, thanks. Another question here. What kind of efforts are there to communicate the results, especially around side effects, time to diagnosis, PROMs, etc., to networks of clinicians?
Well, so again, the idea is to send the data back to the PH associations that participated and that help us spread the word. And then they will work with their local clinician communities on the specific issues that are affecting their own countries, their own communities. And I would also expect something coming out from PVRI that it's more on the clinician side of the education awareness. At all of these congresses that were mentioned earlier, we're also pushing for education and awareness about the results of the survey. I did this same survey at PVRI in Rio. So we are reaching out to the patient, to the clinician community as well.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense, Matt, that you've, created this advocacy tool now by collecting all this great data. You're giving it back to the countries, and then they're in the best position to decide how it can be most impactful there, who really needs to hear it there as a priority.
Correct.
How HCPs can be worked with to, share those. So yeah, that makes sense, and people have a great tool, and now, or will have a great tool, and we'll be putting it to use very soon, I'm sure. Yeah, just thank you so much for your work, and no, I think as per the survey, not so many patients participate in the clinical research on PH. Definitely, this is a way to go. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's the same, and especially as we heard earlier today too, in getting diversity into clinical trials is really important, so we know these medications work for all different kinds of people. All right, no, Matt, thank you so much, and thanks to all our speakers, and thanks to all you for attending here today, our first in the quarterly webinar series for the Alliance for PH. Our next webinar is going to be on June 30th. We're going to talk about World PH Day, which happens on May 5th. We're going to talk about the 5th Baltic PH Conference, which is going to have some important updates on novel PAH agents. PVRI is going to be back to talk about PH drug discovery and the development symposium, which was mentioned earlier, that it's happening in Amsterdam. And finally, the lung transplant symposium will also be on the agenda here. So yeah, thank you all very, very much for joining, and have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.